So welcome back. As I said before, this will be a video on resilience inspired in part by a paper by Joel Owen, which was a comparison between ancient Greek and Roman philosophers and contemporary psychologists' treatment of resilience. First thing I should say, and I cannot emphasize this enough, the first thing is that psychology as it currently exists, psychology as an academic discipline, is not about understanding human beings as particular individuals. Understanding individuals, you and I and our friends, our family members. Psychology is not about that. For the most part, almost all of it is about sidestepping human particularity and instead paying attention to very general attributes, very general concepts like introversion, extroversion, openness, IQ, different constructs that psychologists come up with. And then after they create these constructs, they try to put numbers on them and pretend that they are measuring something. If you measure something, it must be real, right? So that's the first thing. And to understand that, to highlight what psychology is not doing, I find it very helpful to talk about a metaphor from visual arts. So in paintings, we have this style of very naturalistic and realistic paintings, a scene in nature, maybe a person, a situation that is a combination of, it's a very complex combination of features. Now, when we move in visual arts from that kind of realistic, naturalistic representation to abstract art, you get out of representation, you get out of portraying real things or trying to represent real things, and you get to shapes and colors. And something like that movement has happened in psychology. Psychology is about abstract stuff. It is about abstract constructs, concepts that are existing, or they have a presence in the minds of thinkers of psychology, psychological thinkers. And resilience, the way resilience is dealt with, the way resilience is people who work on this concept. I had a colleague at the last university that I used to work at. That university, I had a colleague who, among other things, was researching resilience. And if you listen to that person, if you listen to people who are doing research on this topic, you realize that they are not really interested in people. They are interested in giving questionnaires to lots and lots and lots of anonymous individuals, getting the measurements all compiled in a data set, and then doing their statistical analysis on the data set. All human beings are removed from that kind of research. That is why, that's one of the major reasons I left academia, academic psychology, because I just could not be interested in a discipline that had nothing to do with human beings, the texture of human life. And that's also a reason why I am drawn to serious works of fiction that do so much more representational. They are more about the representational practices that used to be part of psychology in more classic times, in more ancient times. So if you want to read about a story that portrays resilience in its complexity, in a particular unique way, you can read a book like The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas. Or what other books are there that portray that? The Grapes of Wrath, Moby Dick. So these are stories that have a very rich psychological side. And they do so much more. They give us so much more than what current psychology gives us and what current psychology promises to give and completely fails. I'm editing the video now, and I wanted to add this one note quickly. If you read a book, one of these ancient texts that Owen is writing about, pick, for example, Epictetus's Discourses. In the Discourses, you get the sense, even though it is a philosophical text, you get a sense that Epictetus is dealing with actual human individuals. An individual comes to him with a problem, with a concern, and Epictetus is responding as a teacher, as a mentor to this individual. So even in a philosophical text from those ancient times, you get that sense of human beings being around. Human beings are present. That is the sense that is absolutely missing in contemporary psychology. And when it is there, it's like in the anecdotes and examples, it is just so fake. It's not real. You can tell that the work of the person is not really sensitive to these presences, to the presence of actual human beings. Okay, now this presentation, as I said before, is inspired in part by this recent paper by Joel Owen. What that paper does is it tries to put together current psychological thought and the classical thought of ancient Greek and Roman philosophers, and for to do some mutually enriching exercise to see what these two sides have in common, how they can enter into a dialogue with each other. And one of the things that Owen writes when he's starting to write about current psychology, he points out that psychologists say that it is notoriously difficult to define resilience. Defining resilience is notoriously difficult. Now, if you get into any topic in psychology, you get this hand wavy, notoriously difficult, anything, almost anything. I studied attention for many years. I got very deep in the study of mind wandering. Consciousness, of course. This is because psychologists want to give us an abstract and universalized concept for anything: attention, memory, consciousness, decision making, problem solving, because they want to give us an abstract. They want to leave behind all the human, messy human stuff. They want to present us with concepts that are defined in a way that everybody agrees with, but they fail to do that because the moment they present us with one definition, other psychologists come in and they disagree. So the same individuality and particularity that they try to remove comes back in terms of the disagreement between individual psychologists. So they end up confronting that individual differences when it comes to their definition of concepts. That notorious difficulty is part of the manufactured charm of psychology, which is not really charming. It's really annoying because it is a byproduct of the style of work that they have adopted. The other trend that we find in this review, again from current psychology, is that current psychologists try to explain resilience in terms of other things. Like a person is resilient because they have good relationships, because they have a very supportive family, because they have good employment, because they live in a place where there's good government. So the source of resilience, the cause, the way we can explain resilience is by those other things in their network, other concepts. The other really important note is that psychology in its current form is a servant, or it is subservient. It is a servant of techno-capitalist systems. It wants to encourage ways of making or promote, encourage, and produce, create ways of making people better workers, more productive. And that to them, from the subjective standpoint, people will hopefully conceive that as being more successful, being more likable. Okay, so resilience is a thing in that mindset. With that mindset, resilience is a thing that you can get it with your good relationships, with your good family, with your good governance, good employment, and you can channel that. When this way of thinking, resilience is one of your resources, one of the stuff. It is thingified, reified, and it's one of those things that you channeled, you use in order to get what? In order to get personal success, in order to be more productive, in order to persist against external challenges. Okay, now that is completely unlike the treatment from ancient Greek and Roman philosophers. Because for them, the ultimate goal is not individual success, it is not personal success, it is not self-help. And if our goal is that self-help, self-development attitude, if our goal is to become more successful, to get promotion, to get a better salary, to climb the ladder of social status, if our goal is self-centered, no matter how many of those ancient thinkers we are reading, how many quotes we are reading, how many of their books we are reading, how many podcasts about them we are listening, we are not really immersed in their framework. Because their framework is not about serving the individual. Their framework is to strengthen the individual for a social goal, to make the individual strong so that the culture improves as a result. So society, the community improves as a result. And then the community is there to support individuals too. But we have an ethical responsibility within the framework of those more ancient classical thinkers. Another useful contrast that Owen also brings out this contrast is that in current psychology, resilience can be very domain specific. You cannot have, I mean, it is harder to talk about general resilience. It's easier to talk about work resilience or emotional resilience. You have several domains in your life and you are more resilient in this one domain. Even though you might be an alcoholic, but you are very resilient in your work. Okay, so that again, that makes psychology an easier, more ready servant of the capitalist system. Because it says, okay, doesn't matter. You don't need to think about the person as a whole. You just think about them doing their job well. In contrast, ancient thinkers talk about eudaimonia. It's the kind of living, being alive, being a human person in the fullest sense possible. That doesn't mean being maximally productive in your work. It doesn't mean having the maximum amount of pleasure, optimizing yourself. It means something like having a full life, having flourished, having developed, and that in part means being connected to a community, being connected with others, having social concerns, having political and cultural concerns. And a resilient person, from the point of view of ancient thinkers, a resilient person manages to preserve their way of being as an ethical agent. They manage to preserve their ethical loyalty to a set of principles. That's why when I talked about the example of Jimmy Lai, that person from a materialistic standpoint, he is not resilient because he could not keep his comfortable life. But from an ethical standpoint, he's a hero and he does manage to be resilient. He is resilient because what is important about him, what is defining of him as a human being, as an ethical agent, is preserved, even though almost everything else is taken away. So current psychology is based on a set of standards, a way of looking at world, a way of looking at success, a way of looking at what a good life is, the culture of accomplishment, achievement, success, grinding culture. And the ancient thinkers come from a different world. They come from a world in which we have ethical concerns, political concerns. We are agents responsible for what is happening in our communities. And it is very important that these two sides are really working with two different concepts of resilience. It might look like it's the same concept and there are two different discussions of the same concepts, but they are really two different concepts. And the clash, once we put these two together and we really consider them carefully, we feel more of a clash between two different worldviews. And yes, you can immerse yourself in one of them. You can get yourself out of one and immerse yourself. And that's what serious historians and historiographers do. They do that kind of immersive work to not just get one concept, but get in touch and get familiar with the whole web of interconnected concepts, a way of thinking. And it's not an easy back and forth flipping between current contemporary psychologists and ancient philosophers. Okay, I'll stop there. It was not very organized, but I think I managed to get a couple of points out. Before I forget, I would encourage you to also read Owen's article yourself and let me know if you disagree with anything I said in this video. If I left something important out of the discussion, I would love to, in general, get your comment. As always, I encourage you to join my reading group. It is a wonderful community of good people. We would love to have you if you are interested in reading, discussing in a casual yet serious way. Check out my Patreon page, and if you like the video, please like and subscribe to help with the channel. Otherwise, thank you, and I will speak with you in the near future.